Here's a tighter, more cinematic rewrite with stronger hooks, cleaner flow, sharper pacing, and the same dark documentary tone, without timestamps or numbering. She was decorating a nursery. He was building a lie. Laci Peterson was 27 years old, 8 months pregnant with her first child, and living what looked like the life she had always dreamed of. A home in Modesto, California, a baby boy due in February, a husband she once called her soulmate before they had even gone on their first date. Looking back now, that phone call feels haunting, because while Laci was planning for motherhood, Scott Peterson was planning something else entirely. On November 20th, 2002, Scott drove nearly 90 miles to Fresno and sat across from a woman named Amber Fry inside the Elephant Bar during dinner. He told her he was single. That's where the story starts becoming disturbing. How does someone live two completely different lives at the same time? One life was filled with prenatal appointments, Christmas plans, and late-night talks between a daughter and her mother. The other was built on lies, secret meetings, hotel rooms, and stories that kept getting darker with every passing week. And the most chilling part? To everyone around them, everything still looked normal, until suddenly it didn't. Laci Peterson was born Laci Denise Rocha on May 4th, 1975, in Modesto, California. She grew up surrounded by family, warmth, and stability. Her mother Sharon and father Dennis had known each other since high school and later ran a dairy farm near Escalon. From the time she was little, people remembered Laci for her energy. Her stepfather Ron lovingly called her Jabberjaws because once she walked into a room, silence disappeared. She talked constantly, laughed easily, and had a way of making people feel comfortable almost instantly. She brought warmth wherever she went. Laci stayed especially close with her mother. They gardened together for years, not casually, but as something deeply personal between them. Plants, flowers, growing things. It became part of who Laci was. Later, she attended California Polytechnic State University and studied ornamental horticulture because she genuinely loved creating beauty. Friends describe her as thoughtful, welcoming, and deeply caring. She loved cooking, decorating, and making people feel at home. And no one knew her better than Sharon. They spoke almost every single day, sometimes more than once. Whenever anything happened in Laci's life, good or bad, Sharon was usually the first person she called, which makes what happened later feel even heavier. In the summer of 1994, Laci told her mother she had met someone near campus and believed she had just met the man she would marry. That man was Scott Peterson. Scott was charming, confident, and good at making strong first impressions. He brought flowers not only for Laci, but for her mother too. Their first date was a deep-sea fishing trip. Laci got seasick, but somehow the date still felt perfect. The relationship moved quickly. They married in 1997 during a beach wedding at Sycamore Mineral Springs Resort. Later, they opened a small restaurant called The Shack. Scott worked in the kitchen while Laci focused on creating the atmosphere customers loved. She handled the details, the decorations, the feeling of comfort people remembered when they walked in. Eventually, the couple moved back to Modesto to start the next chapter of their lives. Scott took a job selling fertilizer for Trade Corp USA, a position that required frequent travel. Laci stayed close to home, close to family, and close to the future she imagined for herself. By 2002, she was pregnant. They had already chosen a name for their son, Connor. According to nearly everyone around her, Laci was genuinely happy. She threw herself into the pregnancy with excitement and love. She believed her future was finally falling into place. And that's what makes this case so unsettling. Because while Laci was building a future, Scott was quietly building an escape route. The Peterson case was never just about infidelity. It was about timing. Scott didn't suddenly wake up one morning and make one terrible decision. The timeline suggests something much colder, more deliberate. He took out a $250,000 life insurance policy on Laci. He started an affair. He secretly bought a boat nobody knew existed. He lied to Amber Fry and told her he was already a widower. Piece by piece, he was constructing a second life while pretending the first one still mattered. And somehow, Laci never saw it coming. By late 2002, Scott and Amber's relationship had become serious. Amber believed she had met a caring, funny, attentive man who was grieving the loss of his wife. But there was one terrifying problem with that story. Scott's wife wasn't dead. She was 8 months pregnant and decorating for Christmas. On December 9th, Scott bought a 14-foot aluminum fishing boat with cash. He registered it secretly under his business name. Investigators later believed he also made cement anchors inside the warehouse where he stored it. The same day, he told Amber this would be his first Christmas without his wife. Think about that for a second. Laci would not be reported missing for another 15 days. That detail became impossible for investigators to ignore. Because how does someone talk about losing their wife before she's even gone? Amber later confronted Scott during a recorded phone call. "You told me you lost your wife," she said. "Now suddenly your wife is missing?" Scott stumbled to the conversation, but never truly explained himself. For many people, the silence that followed said more than words ever could. On December 23rd, Laci and Scott were seen together publicly for the last time. That evening, they visited a salon where Laci's sister Amy cut Scott's hair. During the visit, Scott casually mentioned plans to go golfing on Christmas Eve. Golfing, not fishing. That detail would later become incredibly important. Hours later, Sharon spoke to Laci on the phone for the final time. It felt completely ordinary. A normal conversation between a mother and daughter. She had no idea it would be the last time she would ever hear her daughter's voice. The next morning, Christmas Eve 2002, Scott claimed he left home around 9:30 a.m. He said Laci planned to walk their dog Mackenzie and mop the kitchen floor while he drove to Berkeley Marina to go fishing. But almost immediately, parts of his timeline started falling apart. When Scott returned home later that afternoon, Mackenzie was alone in the backyard with the leash still attached. Laci was gone. That night, police entered the Peterson home and noticed strange details immediately. The lights were on. A mop sat wet in the kitchen. Detectives later described an odd feeling inside the house. Then came a moment investigators never forgot. During questioning, Scott was asked a simple question. "What kind of fish were you trying to catch?" He froze. Not the wrong answer. No answer at all. The search for Laci Peterson exploded across Modesto. Family members, volunteers, detectives, and national media all joined the effort. Since she was 8 months pregnant, the urgency felt overwhelming. But investigators also noticed something else. Scott's behavior didn't match what they expected from a desperate husband. He didn't appear panicked. He didn't make emotional public pleas. Witnesses even reported seeing him laugh during search gatherings. Then 6 days later, the case changed forever. Amber Fry saw Scott's face on the news. The man she had been dating wasn't a widower. His pregnant wife was missing. Amber immediately contacted police and agreed to secretly record future phone calls with Scott. From that moment on, this stopped looking like a missing person case. It started looking like something far darker. On New Year's Eve, while hundreds gathered at a candlelight vigil praying for Laci's safe return, Scott called Amber and pretended he was in Paris celebrating near the Eiffel Tower. In reality, he was only blocks away from the vigil itself. That phone call became one of the most disturbing moments in the entire investigation. While the community mourned his missing wife, Scott casually flirted with another woman and described fireworks exploding over Paris. Investigators believed Amber wasn't necessarily the motive. She represented something else. A completely separate life Scott desperately wanted. As the investigation deepened, detectives uncovered more contradictions. Scott changed stories. Timelines shifted. Evidence piled up layer by layer. Then, in April 2003, the case reached its most horrifying moment. A couple walking near Point Isabel discovered the body of a full-term male fetus along the shoreline. The next day, a nearby torso was found washed ashore. DNA confirmed everyone's worst fear. The bodies belonged to Laci Peterson and her unborn son Connor. They had surfaced in the same bay where Scott claimed he spent Christmas Eve fishing alone. Days later, Scott Peterson was arrested near a golf course in San Diego. His hair had been dyed blonde. Police found cash, camping gear, multiple cell phones, and identification belonging to other people inside his vehicle. He pleaded not guilty. What followed became one of the most heavily watched murder trials in America. The prosecution had no confession, no eyewitness, and no direct video evidence. Instead, they presented something more powerful: a timeline, a chain of choices, a mountain of small details that together painted a devastating picture. Amber Frey's recordings became central to the trial. Jurors listened to hours of Scott calmly lying, flirting, and pretending everything was normal while his wife remained missing. That calmness disturbed people more than rage ever could. In November 2004, after months of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned its verdict: guilty of first-degree murder for Laci Peterson, guilty of second-degree murder for Connor Peterson. Scott Peterson was later sentenced to death. Years afterward, that death sentence would be overturned due to procedural issues during jury selection, though his conviction remained intact. He was eventually resentenced to life in prison without parole. Even today, debates still surround the case. New hearings continue. Some groups argue Scott Peterson may be innocent, but one fact has never changed. Laci Peterson and her unborn son were found in the waters of the San Francisco Bay, the same waters where Scott Peterson said he spent Christmas Eve alone.